Our special guest today on this program, which will start in just a few minutes, is James Moss. He's a Brit and long time in London in property management, and relocation services connected with that. But he's now in Manhattan, Midtown Manhattan on the east side in the real estate business and in a very high-tech way in the relocation management business. We'll be right back, and he's going to do a deep dive with me. The show is called Curzon, which is the name of his company, Curzon, Curzon Central. And the show is Curzon Comments. My special guest, James Moss, coming up.
Okay.
All right, we're back. And my guest today on Curzon Comments is James Moss. He's a Brit, but now in the U.S., in Midtown Manhattan, thriving in real estate and high-tech customer service. James, welcome.
Hey, great to see you again. Great to be back. And I just love doing our Curzon comments together. I think it's fantastic.
I think this is number three, right?
Yeah, I think so. And it's our sort of first sort of kickoff one for the year, which is great. A lot's been happening since we last caught up. Various new presidents and all sorts of things going on in the world.
Oh,
Um,
challenges, boy, everywhere. LA
yeah,
fires
yeah,
and
yeah.
just,
And
yeah.
and that impacts everything. It impacts the property side, the relocation side. Um, so yeah, so great to be here. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. As a matter of fact, today at 1:30, I'm having a discussion. I won't get into a lot of details, but with a LA-based successful uh, real estate broker, owner, operator, and it's about the dramatic, sudden interest in people who are burned out of their homes and they
Mhm.
need to find a place to live fast. And the competition is fierce and the pricing is naturally increasing all over Southern California. So at 1:30 today, I have an appointment, which is another reason why I'm looking like this. uh, we're going to
Very
be
smart.
talking about reviving my original print publication called California Bound, LA Bound, and San Diego Bound, but doing them online and area information, sponsored programs by this broker. So, uh, not sure when that will launch, or even if it will launch. But I'm excited about this opportunity, and I just wanted to share that with you. So, you are in the business of relocation, of helping people relocate, if not just money, in order to buy property across borders. So let's talk about that for a second. FDI, foreign direct investment into the U.S. It's a big deal. You have connections, I happen to know, you have connections in Dubai, for instance, as well as, of course, in the UK, where you were heavily involved for years and years in executive level property management. And with that, some relocation activities. And now you're doing it in Manhattan, but not just limited there, I know. But what is your take on what can happen with people who are not poor people, they're homeowners. And in LA, that means that they've ridden up equity. Now, what about that question? What equity remains? Well, they don't have a house anymore, but,
No,
but they
no.
but they have the property. They still own that piece of land. And
It's a great question. And it's really tough. I was just in LA, by the way.
Now tell us.
I was out there over the last few days on some business things, and I was right in the middle of the fires. Not in them, but above them. And they were
Yeah,
sort of
nearby, huh?
around, so to speak. The devastation is unbelievable to see. Where I was sort of between Santa Monica and Malibu,
Hmm.
which is quite a high net worth area
Yeah, but
up
and you're
there.
in the hills above it,
Yeah, we're in the hills above it.
and and
Very,
and that area was not burned.
no, there were fires sort of springing up. Literally, I mean, it was sort of, I was doing like Airbnbs, which were really hard to find and really expensive because, everyone's trying to find somewhere to live. They've lost over 10,000 dwellings in those fires. Um, and going back to your point there, yeah, what are these, you know, people going to do? Technically, they have a house, but they don't. Obviously, the property's destroyed. But you then go to the insurance piece and say, okay, well, you can rebuild. But that's, what I've been reading is that's probably going to be quite a long process for a lot of people. I mean, up to like 3 years. The other thing is uh, quite a few insurance policies excluded certain types of natural disasters because insurance premiums in Los Angeles have been rising at a really rapid rate as insurers withdraw from wanting to provide insurance because of the fire risk. Um, so just on a local LA scene, and we operate in LA, we have coverage in Los Angeles and Southern California as well as San Francisco. I think it's going to be a huge challenge. I think how responsibly will insurance companies react? I don't know. Insurance, U.S. insurance companies have a real policy of pushback, which they didn't have like 10, 20 years ago. They're in businesses to make money. They used to be in businesses to help people out as a sort of fair deal, fair part of the bargain type of thing. And I think that culture's changed. I think that's going to make it extremely challenging for people looking to rebuild. And of course, most people's net worth is actually wrapped up in their property. So on that point, just on LA, I think it's going to be really tricky. And it'll be interesting. Interesting sounds like such a crass word, but to see how it unfolds will be really quite something. It was just started to rain. As I was leaving, the first day of rain started. So hopefully that sort of can help things out. But then if people mudslides coming in pretty quickly. And so another sort of climate change catastrophe on their doorstep.
Yeah,
Um,
economically, it's really a mess, but the values are are there, and although some people who were burnt out will probably never come back into that neighborhood, um, they may leave the state, or they. Uh, it's is it a no-brainer? Will the insurance companies pay off? And the federal government is going to step in and get involved for sure, to help manage the situation with the state.
well,
Uh,
one hopes so. But
yeah.
the sort of chemistry isn't so great between the administration in Washington and the governor of California, for example.
So
Um,
on the contrary, well, yes, that is number one. But number two, on the contrary to that, this is a golden opportunity for the Republicans, led by President Trump at the moment, that uh, to demonstrate helpfulness to people in need. And it doesn't matter how they voted last time, the next time, if the federal government, as run by President Trump, does not step up, and if they do not be uh, a benefactor, if you will, these
It's
people
mm,
are never, ever going to forget that, and they'll be quite vociferous about that. So there's no need to offer threats because the threats will come right back at you. And so the idea is to work together. Now, Governor Newsom is really smart. He has lined up already leadership from Hollywood, uh, who are very wealthy people,
yeah,
uh, to lead the charge of fundraising and rebuilding. And that's from a community PR point of view. It's still a government, state, local, economic, safety, environmental cleanup and safety. There's probably going to be a heavy hand of government to prevent price gouging. However, this is America and this is California and extremely entrepreneurial,
yeah.
and the market will bear whatever. I mean, it's going to be fascinating times.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. The governor's terrific there. It's a wonderful opportunity for the federal government to really shine, and to get in there and to rebuild and to um, reinstill confidence, I guess. I mean, it's a test for them, um, and it's a terrific opportunity that shouldn't be missed. And it's a chance for the federal government to really prove itself. I mean, this is a national emergency. I mean,
And the
it's a
world is watching. Yeah, the
yeah,
world is watching.
it is. I mean, everyone I talk to, not just in the States but internationally, it frequently comes up, in conversation. What's happening, and and it's all over the news, of course, all over the news networks, the international news networks, as well as the American.
So let's just talk about the construction materials and not pointing fingers at what could or should have been done. It wasn't. But some people took steps on their own to uh, protect their property by retrofitting the structures with fire retardant, if not fireproof, building materials,
Yeah,
not just clearance of trees and whatever from overhanging the house, but there are properties in the tragic Lahaina, Hawaii fire that didn't burn and everything around them burned. The houses with this fire retardant uh, texture, building materials, and systems that were built in. Yeah, of course, it costs money to get there, then to
yeah,
do that.
yeah,
But those homes are protected.
yeah. It's a really good point. A lot of the properties that were destroyed were older properties, which had been around for decades.
Right.
Um, Newer properties and properties with owners who probably had deep pockets, and the vision or the reality of knowing that they were living in a high risk fire area, fireproof their properties. Um, and they did so very efficiently, and it was with it was a combination of things actually. It was physical materials, building materials, so using stone and brick, for example, instead of wood. Um, that was one thing. The other thing was the planting of trees and the landscaping around. And a number of the properties that survived had very water absorbent trees, and apparently that made quite a difference. They weren't as brittle or as high risk to fires. The other thing that's quite interesting, I was chatting to someone who uh, lives out there and knows a bit about these things on the property side. They're saying the other thing is a lot of the newer build materials, building materials, are actually quite flammable,
Uh,
including plastics and stuff like that. And if you look at house construction, property construction, but particularly residential dwellings um, in the States, they're often built with wood, with plastic linings, and so on, plastic materials for drainage, and all of these materials, a lot of them are very flammable.
hmm.
And so that was another factor. And again, you had the older houses, which didn't have as fire resilient materials being used, but beyond that, they were using older materials which actually had no fire proofing qualities. Um, so it was a really, it was, technically really interesting point. Things like that often go back to building regulations. And I mean, in the UK, London, for example, it doesn't have to be London, they tend to build up with brick, and they're very tight and fast moving fireproofing regulations and building material regulations. There was a big fire in London, very tragic one, the Grenfell fire, getting on for almost a decade ago now. And that's led to a whole new raft of legislation and enforcement of bringing buildings up to standard for fire protection reasons. And it's a really big deal. Um, and I think I don't know enough about Californian building regulations, but I suspect there's going to have to be an entire review of that. Um, but you're still, that's you can't do it overnight, and you can't control nature. And will the fires happen again next year? Will they happen every year? Not necessarily to the extent that they've happened
Right.
this year, but you can't get away from it. It's a very tricky conundrum to deal with.
So let's talk about Curzon and what other comments you'd like to make. What's happening in Manhattan? The east side of Manhattan. Well, all over Manhattan. It's booming.
Well, Manhattan's been pretty cold actually. Lately, it's been a very cold start to the year, so people have been sort of not getting out too much. Um, but what's happening here on the sort of property rental side or the property side generally is fairly flat at the moment. Um, yeah, everyone's, of course, was hoping the interest rates would come down, go down further. That looks less likely at the moment. There's quite a lot of refinancing, planned. A little bit of there when a mortgage uptake was better over the last few months. Um, but supply remains a problem here. The top end, the luxury end, we do a little bit with that, but we're more sort of in the middle sections, if you like. Um, the top end struggling, and is likely to continue to do so. Mid market is not too bad. I mean, everyone's really waiting for the spring to roll around. We'll see what happens again with interest rates and the stock market, which really drives this city, and it's driven by finance. Yeah. In terms of rentals, rental values aren't too bad. They're sort of holding fairly well. We're not seeing the big increases that we saw immediately post-pandemic. There's still an issue of supply. A lot of landlords have pulled out of the market because of really onerous um, tax situations whereby they were no longer able to recuperate expenditure on property improvements and that sort of thing. Um, yeah, there's some interesting legislation going through as to who works for who, which kicks in May this year on the rental side. So,
No, are you referring to buyer brokerage?
well, I was thinking more rentals actually. On the
Rental.
buyers, the changes have already kicked in legally. So the MLSs now cannot offer to share the seller's fees with the buyer's agent. So buyer's agents basically have to be independently retained now, which I think is great because I think that's the way. I think a buyer's agent, which is what Curzon is in London and very much here in New York now. We represent the best interests and we protect our client's position and we negotiate the best deals, by the way, which usually means lower deals. So we end up saving people money, but we're retained to do that now. On the rental side, where rental fees in New York, agents fees are 15%, and shared is a loose term here between the landlord's agent and the tenant's representative. And if the tenant doesn't have a representative, it all goes to the landlord's agent. So that's quite an interesting thing. And the tenant has to pay. That's going to change in May. And in May,
Change it in what way? How will it change?
in May, in the month of May,
And
the
how?
the new local New York legislation comes into force, where um, landlords, agents, and tenants agents have to be represented directly by the parties they're representing. So that's going to change the way that letting agents, mainstream letting agents in New York, work. It's basically going to effectively halve their remuneration, I think. For us, it doesn't make any difference because we act for tenants, we act for corporate assignees, we charge for our services.
And who
Uh,
pays?
the tenant pays
Hmm.
if they want
So
to. I
the
mean, if
person hiring you,
sorry,
the person hiring you is the one who pays you.
that's right, and often it's paid. So we would charge our client a fee, 1 month's rent or thereabouts. And usually that's paid by the client's company as part of their relocation costs. They get expert, independent, professional representation by qualified agents who know exactly what they're doing, know the market, and know how to get the best deals done, but also know how to navigate through the buildings. I mean, a huge part of the battle here in New York, and we don't just cover New York, but when we talk about New York, is getting through the boards. Even if it's just a rental situation, be it a co-op or a condo, and they're usually condos, you still have to go through this whole board process, which is incredibly intimidating, extremely personal, requires a ton of information, including all your financial details, credit history, your references. You know, it's a minefield. And if you don't know what you're doing, it can end in disaster, i.e., you don't get the property because you fall through into all these elephant traps. But with a bit of, professional navigating and assistance, because we do this all the time, all of that sort of vanishes, and we get nice, smooth, people moving in and happy tenants, happy assignees, and stuff like that. But it's life's getting more complicated.
That's fascinating. Well, thank you for sharing that information. Um, what would you like to end up this meeting with? Some kind of action statement that you'd like to explain to the audience?
Well, I tell you what I think would be quite good. I've got a couple of slides which just puts the whole it's really more about the relocation markets and how they're changing the companies and clients, and
Good.
maybe be worth taking, 2 or 3 minutes just to spin through those.
Yes, I
Um,
invite you to use my screen share uh, to upload them.
okay, well, let me push now.
Uh,
Okay, so this is
hap
just, who we
ha-
are. This is
happy
Curzon.
people. All right.
Happy people. Note, we use a lot of mobile technology because it's so efficient and very cost effective and all sorts of good things. But so we sort of have a gathering around a phone, and really that's the thing to sort of bear in mind. But anyway, I'll just canter through a little bit here. Um, it's quite interesting just taking a quick snapshot of the size of the global relocation market and where it's going. Um, and as you can see, the value in US billions of dollars, 2024 of the relocation management service market, okay, so we're talking about services here, is just over 34 billion. Um,
Meaning the fees paid by corporations to the management company.
that's right. That's right. That's the market we're looking at here. We're looking at large global relocation, shipping, and management companies. Okay, that's what we're looking at here. Um, And you can see that for 2032, the current growth rate is out looking like 43 billion. Um, I think a couple of things to note here is that the compound growth rate over the period is only 2.9%. And that is pretty low in terms of an industry. The dollar amounts are significant. I mean, this isn't a small sector. But the growth rate compounded is actually not high. And the reason for that is that the market is really quite saturated with old school relocation companies who are doing things the sort of old fashioned way, if you like. There's not a lot of technology. There's not a lot of flexibility or nimbleness of movement. Uh, Um, but it's just interesting to show this because I think it explains why new younger companies, which are much more technology or hybrid focused, are really making an impact on this market now. And we are one of those companies.
Let me ask you a question, if I may, to go back to that slide for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
That's a lot of money displayed there across the next 8 years. And so who's paying that money? It's companies, and they're paying companies to it's corporate employers who are paying management services, and that's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
value there. Not the management services, but that's the value of the cost. That's the cost, the expenditure. Is that correct?
yes, that's right. I mean, this is what companies who are moving their employees, relocating their employees around the world, are paying. To relocation management companies.
That's a lot of
Uh,
money.
it's a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing about large relocation management companies is that they tend to do more of the sort of overall coordination, and they don't actually do that much of the work on the ground moving the assignee. That's usually gets filtered down to smaller companies. Where the larger companies come into play is that they're very good on good on policies, bigger picture, that type of thing. But I think, to be honest with you, their model's going to have to change, and we're already beginning to see this. We're seeing some fairly major players exit the market at the moment because it's a complicated process. Um, we're seeing mergers. So Court, for example, recently sold their relocation management business to Dwellworks, who are a large US based, again, relocation management company, but also they're a hybrid property company. So they're quite an interesting model. But the large companies, so we're talking companies like Server and Cartis here, particularly in the United States, um, are yeah, they're being paid by their clients, whoever they may be. Big corps. I don't know who all their client bases are, but so your big corporate clients like your Googles and your Shells and your IBMs and your Exxon Mobils and all the rest of it. This is what they're paying these guys. And yeah, so that's sort of what's happening. So we're seeing a consolidation taking place because there's no organic growth for these people. Okay, there's no organic growth. So we're seeing a consolidation going on. The other thing is, as mentioned earlier, is we're seeing new technology-based, much more nimble companies coming into play, of which we are one of those. To add to that, just throw it in, with all the excitement on DeepSeek over the last 24 hours um, on the stock market, and you might have noticed that Nvidia day before yesterday dropped 20% in market cap, $500 billion. So they picked up about 10% yesterday. So they're sort of falling back. Um, but we were rated the number one uh, disruptive relocation company on DeepSeek, which was great. I wasn't expecting that. So I just thought I mentioned that in the process. There are other companies out
Way to
there,
go. Yeah.
but nice to be in the mix.
So how do I get on Deep Seek?
It's terribly easy. It's the most widely downloaded app in the United States over the weekend. It's easy. You simply go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and put in DeepSeek. Up comes the app. You download it for free. You use it for free.
Yeah, so it's easy to use.
Terribly, yeah. I mean, it's I've used AI. We use AI in what we do. We use AI quite a bit more as a support type of thing rather than as we don't put AI directly in touch with uh, our clients. We actually use it to support our relo advisors. We use it for other things.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Um,
using AI now recording the text
yeah. Oh,
uh,
okay.
right now on the Zoom here and related services. Okay, so this shows in the next 8 years that companies are going to be organizing a lot of relocations, and therefore the each relocation is going to have a price. And this is the structure composition then of what we're looking at on this chart. Is that right?
That's right. That's what this chart is showing. And it's showing that it's a relatively low growth market. Okay, compounded low growth market. It's showing it's a big market, it's a global market. Um, and it's just, it's showing some interesting numbers. And they're sort of core numbers. So one can sort of, grasp the scale of the market and where it's going. But it also, I think, um, puts up quite a lot of red flags in the industry. And again, I come back to this smarter way of doing things, more cost-effective way of doing things, more efficient way of doing things, utilizing technology. Technology doesn't solve everything, but it goes a long way for making things much more efficient and much more cost-effective.
Fascinating. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Okay, so I'll flick to the next slide. Okay, so what we've got here is again, we're looking over the 8-year period. And this basically confirms the shift that's taking place to technology. In this slide, it's relocation management service market share by 2032. So it's a projection. And the blue is online services. And when they say online, what they mean is technology driven services. Okay. Doesn't necessarily have to be an online computer thing. It includes apps, for example. I mean, for instance, like our app and so on. Um, Offline is more the traditional approach where there's almost no technology. But in fact, that's a slight misnomer because offline uses emails and computers and stuff like that, but it's not very sophisticated. Um, so looking at the online services, so there are two groups here. There's the types of services and then the types of businesses that apply. We've sort of covered the online service, and say it includes apps, it includes virtual. So virtual, you can do lots of virtual tours of properties these days. In my experience, clients actually like to go and physically see them if they can. But if they're on short-term assignments, and you've got a good rapport with them and they trust you, you can do a lot of this virtually these days. And we've done that fairly successfully. Most of the time, we do actually like to get the clients into the properties before they decide. But if they know the areas, they know the locations a bit, even if they're in a different part of the world, they're in London, they come into New York, for example, or they're in Los Angeles, they're going to New York, or they're in Dallas and they're going to DC. Um, Often people do know enough that their confidence level is good enough that they can actually make virtual decisions.
I'd like to
Um,
ask you a question about your logo in the upper right there, the Curzon
yeah,
and underneath it says relocation online
yes,
digital. So
that's
aren't
right.
online and digital the same thing?
Within the broadest concept, then I would say yes. Digital, I think, leads more to um, other devices other than a PC or a laptop. So, pretty well everything we do is done on one of these. It's done on a mobile phone. I'm not saying
Yeah,
all of it is, but most of it is.
yeah.
Um, and it's done, it's done using WhatsApp, for example. I mean, our actual app is super secure. It's actually got WhatsApp built into it, which I'll come on to later on. So yeah, so online digital, it is the realm of technology. It is the realm of technology. Um, so I'm going to jump down to the actual sort of company classifications. You can see here we've got large enterprises, yeah, and then below we have SMEs. So large enterprises, according to this data source, which is pretty good. Larger companies, they say, require more information. They have more corporate requirements. Maybe they need more work on policies or integration into other things. And for those types of large companies, um, often, they need a large company to a large company type of solution. I don't believe that's always the case, personally. I've acted in my career and with Curzon with some huge global companies who just want to drill down on what we do, and that's what they're really interested in. So what we're finding, what we're seeing, what the market is seeing with the RMSs, relocation management service providers, the big ones, is they're trying to sort of get, get a handle on the tech side and everything else as well. I mean, they're almost overselling everything they can possibly do. The expression of throwing the kitchen sink at it, is not entirely out of place. But you've got to bear in mind these companies are very big. They have a lot of overheads. They often have hard assets as well as soft assets and people assets, and they are struggling. And they are struggling. And for these companies to adapt, it's not always easy. The analogy I use is think of an oil tanker going down the Suez Canal, which you might recall a few years ago, and it decided to turn around. and it got stuck, right?
Right.
This is the challenge that these big RMSs have. How do you turn around to adapt your model to address a very fast changing market? The pandemic totally changed the way people work and operate and the way companies think. Seen a massive growth in alternative companies, which will come on to in a moment. You've seen this collapse of the commercial office markets because no one's renting big spaces anymore. So there's an awful lot going on that just doesn't fit into these guys, 20th century model. We're in the 21st century now, and these guys are still operating in the 20th, yeah, and maybe dare I say the 19th century. Some of them. And I don't want to be too rude because some of them are very good, but I'm just saying, uh, one size does not fit all. That's for sure. The much more interesting group, I think, are the SMEs, which are the small and medium-sized enterprises. And these are often not poor companies, by the way, but they're growth companies. They're often technology companies, or they're companies in sectors that heavily use technology. They tend to be, I say, smaller businesses really looking for value in their relocation choices. Often they have a mix. So some people want to, well, in fact, more, I say a mix. Most of them actually want very mobile, quick, cost-effective solutions. But some of them also want other elements of other sort of traditional elements as well. Um, and these smaller companies like to get in and out pretty quickly. They like the expertise at their fingertips. They like to be able to go to get that expertise when they want to do it and in the way they want to do it. And again, mobile phones aren't mobile phones really, they're mobile computers.
Yeah.
Your whole life lives on a phone. I get up in the morning, and I shave and I listen to the BBC in London. We're doing this, I do all my telephone calls, emails, everything sort of goes off the phone, and everyone does that. I mean, um, so that is really the way to go. So what is happening? So on this chart here, I think is a slight anomaly. I think they've missed a point actually, and the point that they've missed, or the point that this suggests, is a lot of these large enterprises actually want to be operating like SMEs, and a lot of the companies that the traditional relocation management service providers can't provide services for are no longer working the way they used to. These companies have changed, they're much more agile. If you look at co-working communities, for example, you will often find very major companies putting cohorts of employees and departments and so on into those very dynamic environments. And the reason they do it is for the cultural richness, the whole environmental drive for Generation Z and younger millennials,
So
particularly
it's
Generation Z.
teaming. It's organizing teams, but they're doing it rather than in one central location in multiple locations.
Exactly, exactly. And the other thing is much more cost effective
Right.
because they don't have to sign up for 5 year leases or
Right.
20-year leases or whatever it used to be. When I started in the property world, all the institutional leases were 25 years with 5 yearly upward only rent reviews. I haven't seen one of those in years. I mean, they sort of the mod now you can rent a desk, an address by the hour. You can put a team in place for, it's for a project for a year, for a couple of years, and you can get out of the contract easily. You just serve a 30-day termination notice. Um, Terrific for administrators, company administrators, very good for HR budgets. Likewise, mobile, more agile relocation companies who can offer uh, technology solutions, and now also elements of the older school uh, relocation services. And we now do both, by the way. We always lead with the technology. Whoever we work with uses our technology and they use it the way they want, and we provide the service levels that they
Very
require.
interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
so you're getting the large enterprises actually want to function like SMEs because it's a win-win situation.
Oh, this is great. So I thank you so much for sharing this information, James. I'm sure the audience is going to find this fascinating. So this report that you're referring to, this was done by a university or a company?
It's done by a global research group called Business Research. I don't know much about them, but they cover a whole they cover all sorts of industries and stuff like that. And their data is pretty good. Um, so yeah, I mean, one's always looking to try and find validated, transparent data. And these guys, you know, as from what I've seen, they're pretty reliable.
So to sum up now, a large organizations such as oil and gas
Auto, yeah, that type of thing.
or Siemens or some large company, they're still relocating staff.
Um, yes, but it's changed a lot. The volume of business, relocation business going through the traditional relocation management service providers is a lot less than it was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
How much less, it's hard to say. People I've talked to recently in the industry are talking about 50% drops. Um, I think it varies industry to industry, to be honest with you, but there has been a significant drop. And I think part of that is a drop in the profile of the assignees, the employees who are moving. You don't tend to get as many big families moving and all the rest of it because that is so disruptive to the family, and you have technology now. So, for example, there's no need to move say a senior employee talent resource from New York to London and the entire family, the kids are at high school, they're going to college or whatever. It's hugely disruptive, hugely expensive. So often what we're now seeing is that executives will hop on planes for, 4 to 5 days for a week and then fly back again. We see quite a lot of that going on. We see a lot of it going on internally in the US in particular, where the time zones are a little bit easier. But the cost of moving a family, paying for the education of the children, the housing, the personal disruptiveness of all of that. I mean, it can be very exciting, of course, but when times are tough and budgets have been looked at, and you have technology like we're doing this call now. I do calls with my team in London and clients in Dubai and out and here in the States. We do pretty well everything on these video platforms these days, and it just saves time, saves travel time, saves travel costs. It saves a hell of a lot of relocation costs. I mean, I'll show you a couple more slides in a sec, but we can actually bring relocation costs down, service provider costs by as much as 80% just by people choosing the services or the time that they actually want and need. Not that someone's just going to throw at them and say, get on with it. People will say, this is what I need. They're much more sort of focused on the bullet, what they need. They need accommodation. They need a bit of help with social security, getting their social security card or setting up a bank account. A lot of that can be done really, really quickly. A lot of that can be done remotely with much less time spent on the ground with a very rifled approach to accommodation.
Fascinating, James. Okay, what's next?
Okay, well, just a couple more. This is really just a little bit about how we do it. I won't go into the depth here, but you can see we use, as our platform, we use a mobile digital platform, which sits on on your phone, your smartphone. And yeah, it's very clean, very easy, it's very intuitive. And on top of this, we're all communicating basically using going through WhatsApp. It doesn't have to be WhatsApp, um, but it's secure and it's encrypted. So I just wanted to give a quick sort of bigger view of what an app actually looks like, or what our
Good. Thank
application
you.
looks like. Um, and I'll get you one more slide. In fact, I skipped a slide here. I'll just find you one more slide. Yeah, this is just our coverage. I mean, we're mainly in the US, UK, and Europe, but we have a nice reach globally, um, out to Asia Pacific in particular. And as I say, we provide a range of services. Um, we really focus on the home finding, the relocation, and we're partners who do the shipping and the visa and immigration side of life. We're really good on real estate wherever we go because our people are qualified and experts in not just relocation, but actually in the local real estate market. So, for example, I'm a qualified British expert surveyor, broker, licensed broker here in New York, and so are members of my team. So we can pretty well operate anywhere and troubleshoot in Australia, South Africa, India, just to name a few. We also know Europe very well. So places like Switzerland, for example, which is a fairly major center for certain businesses, pharmaceuticals, and stuff like that. We're very comfortable operating in those sort of locations across Europe. Um, but we also do a combination. So it's actually what we've found more recently is the pendulum swinging back slightly. And larger clients think, oh, can you do a bit of, can you also help us on traditional and taking people out and around and doing more handholding? The answer is absolutely yes. We sort of provide a VIP service that does that. And that's part of what we do. So there you go. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of that. That's what CurzonRelo is all about.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you for using these slides. It really augments all the spoken words. And thank you for this. This is a fascinating chart right here. And I thank you for being my guest here on Curzon Comments. Please come back and do it again.
Thank you very much, Ed. All the best. Take care.
Thank you.
Ciao.